No, I don't. I want to talk more about that. Thank you for answering that question because I know that's been a big debate in the cop watcher community, the audit community. So when someone says, "Well, you go to a building, you film it, people come out, they, are upset with that," and they say, "Well, that's not journalism." What would you say to them about that?
Well, the story is every single time. People are like, what's your story? The story is every single time, how do public officials react to a journalist engaging in journalistic activity, which is recording and documenting for matters of public interest, doing FOIA requests, checking up the salaries, investigating overtime. There's a lot of different avenues that First Amendment auditors, and again, I'm not the spokesperson for First Amendment auditors, or I tend to work alone, and I can only speak for myself. But I investigate, and once I find something, I continue to investigate. If somebody violates my rights, it's not just a video and it goes away. It becomes a series where I go to internal affairs. I sit down with them. I record it. I show people the internal affairs process, the FOIA process. A lot of people don't know this. They don't teach you this in school. You need to learn how to get this access to these documents, how to handle these internal affairs replays. This is like an educational journalistic endeavor that I'm engaging in, that I'm trying to educate the public and give this information to the public as a whole.
So Taya had this question. What made you decide to do this in the first place? Like, when did you say, you know what, I'm going to pick up a camera and street this building? And I think it's very informative and interesting that public officials will come out and confront you just for filming, because I think that says something about the power structure in this country, because everyone should be able to film a no matter what they're doing. But anyway, what was the first, gave you the idea to go into a library, go in somewhere and shoot? What started that with you?
Yeah, so I used to watch First Amendment auditors and watch these kind of body camera footage, cops, everything on YouTube that I could about law enforcement interactions. I thought it was interesting. I thought that some of them went about it the wrong way. I didn't agree with a lot of them. I support everybody's First Amendment right to curse, scream, and yell at the police. You can do that all you want. I support it. It's part of our constitutional rights. I just think that there was a better way to do it, or a different way to do it, a different approach to go about doing it. I was a logistics director for a manufacturing company, basically just a warehouse manager for a cosmetic company, and I was furloughed during COVID, and I was at home with nothing to do, and I've never seen anybody do it in my area with my Suffolk County Police Department, and I have no animus towards them. I actually, again, my views are that law and order is necessary in our society, very important. I just believe that law enforcement officers should be held to a high standard. They should be held to at least the same standard as we the people, as the public. So I went there and I was filming. They had some military vehicles. I thought that was interesting. I was filming all their vehicles, just walking around the parking lot, the publicly accessible areas, and they tried to jump me. They got right around me, pulled out their badge, trying to grab my camera, making furtive movements behind me, and I had no idea what I was doing. I'm like, I don't consent to searches or seizures. I was just stuttering. I didn't know what to say, what to do, and it kind of was like, wait a minute, like, you're supposed to protect and serve me. Like, why are you treating me like I'm a criminal when I'm not engaged in criminal activity? And it was definitely concerning behavior. And you think I would just say, well, that was interesting and stop. But it kind of lit a fire to where I was like, you know what? I want to expose every single one of these people who treat us like garbage. Who violate our rights. I want to expose every single one of them for the world to see. And at the time, nobody was really watching me. But my channel, my platform on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, it all blew up. No idea how, it just did. And that's where we are today, 4 years later.
Well, were you surprised that just having a camera would elicit, and this has happened to you more than once, where you have a camera? I was just watching your video. I think you were in Largemont or something. And, you just had a camera and people just seem to go nuts. Does that surprise you? And why do you think they respond that way?
I think they respond that way because they're ignorant of the law. They're ignorant of what their duties are. A lot of officers I've seen, and I do trainings with law enforcement agencies across the country, seminars, district attorney's offices. I just did one in Savannah, Georgia at a district attorney's office. I have another one coming up on North Carolina at a police department.
And what are you training them on?
So First Amendment auditors, how to engage, how to react to it. I go and they give seminars, 2-hour seminars with them. We have conversations, ride-alongs, command staff meetings. I want to help bridge the gap between law enforcement and public.
What do you say to them when you say, so you see a guy with a camera, what's your advice to them if you see some guy filming, you don't know why? What's your advice?
So it depends on the scenario. If somebody called them and said, hey, some guy's out here filming with the camera, they have to respond. I understand that, so go respond. You respond. You can either choose to educate the person and say, hey, what else is he doing besides filming? And then explain to them why filming is constitutionally protected, how it is constitutionally protected, and he's not doing anything wrong. Engage in a dialogue with the person. Don't just say, let me see your ID. Engage in a dialogue. Hey, sir, how are you? You just taking some pictures today? Mind if I ask why? No? Okay. Have a great day, sir. And move about your day. It's actually very, and I tell this to them, it's very quite simple. It's not, it's when you let your ego. I think the biggest problems in law enforcement is ego and the lack of accountability. And it goes hand in hand. And I believe ego comes with being undereducated on our constitutional rights. Because if you got a guy like me who's saying, hey, I know what, you don't have reasonable articulable suspicion to demand my ID. And he's like, what? You know how many law enforcement officers have no idea what that is? And
Is that true that a lot of them don't know reasonable articulable?
they have no idea. That is like the foundational aspect of their job. And they're like, what's that? And it blows my mind that they have no idea. Like, that's what you need in order to make contact with somebody and get their ID and do these kinds of things.
Well, what grade would you give the average law enforcement officer in terms of their constitutional comprehension skills? Like, how, from your experience, how well do they know the Constitution?
Not at all. I believe the law enforcement officers, I would have to give as a whole, again, I have a lot of friends in law enforcement. I've made a lot of contacts, relationships with departments, and there's a lot of good people, but I would say that the system itself, it's a systemic problem that they fail to educate. They teach them how to point their gun and shoot. They teach them how to pull out their taser, how to operate their taser, how to use of force. But the constitutional aspect, and I've heard this from law enforcement agencies across the country, is like, it's just not there. They don't have a robust constitution, or they just go over really quick. Fourth Amendment, you can't search somebody's car without consent. But it's not a robust training program when it comes to concept. They're not lawyers, so they don't know about case law. And then also things are changing constantly. There's case law that changes the way laws are implemented. The Constitution is interpreted. So they have no knowledge of it, because at the end of the day, a lot of the times they're just doing what they want and they get away with it. Not every day they run into somebody like me who's going to push back. When they go up to somebody like, let me see some ID, the normal person's just going to give them ID, right? They're just going to say, hey, you take my ID. Yeah, sorry, officer. So sorry. But when you got somebody's like, for what? Because I told you to. No, that's not how that works. What do you mean? Like, so again, it's in action. In practice, they're not really getting the training that they or the lessons that they need, because they're just, people roll over and they just do whatever they want.
Yeah, and it seems like once you bring up the Constitution or the constitutionality, they seem to double down on their power, so to speak. Is that something you've seen a lot?
Yeah, so I mean, they all take oaths to uphold the Constitution, and normally when you bring up the Constitution, it's kind of like, oh, you're one of those, and it's like, you're that guy. The Constitution, it's like, yeah, it's important. You swore an oath to uphold it. Yeah, it's very important. That's what keeps us from going into an authoritarian government as opposed to a democracy. So let's take it seriously.
Now, people have tried to discredit you online, say you have a criminal record, other things like that. How do you respond to them?
Well, I just found out today that Brian Fahey would have had a criminal record if he wasn't prosecuted. I've been arrested 12 times while auditing. 12, 13. I'm losing track.
Any times without auditing, where you weren't auditing, just something else that happened in your life? Or?
Yeah, so 13 years ago, I was arrested for attempted robbery back when I was 20 years old. And I was held accountable. There's a difference. I did not hold any animus towards the police. I did not say, hey, you guys, you did this to me. No, I was a man and I took accountability. Yes, there's always reasons and outside factors, growing up without a father, that played a major role in my lifestyle and what I was engaging in without that structure, hanging around the wrong people, which is why I tell my kids now, you have to be very careful who you're hanging around with, because I'm not a career criminal. I've never been I'm a great guy. I know that. I know I have good morals, but you make a mistake and a bad decision, you have to own it. I like to say bad decision, not a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. It was a bad decision. It was a horrible decision. And I was held accountable for it. But why are law enforcement officers held accountable for theirs? I know a lot of law enforcement officers that tell me, I could have had a criminal record, but I got away with it, or they let me go. They gave me a smack on the wrist. I unfortunately didn't. I was held fully accountable.
Well, let me ask you a question. It seems like you can't be redeemed in this country, that you make a mistake when you're young and then people want to hold it over your head. Do you think that's kind of a problem in this country, that we need to forgive people, or if they take accountability?
Yeah, I think, listen, I'm not looking for redemption from anybody watching, anybody that supports me. I don't need redemption. My family, my friends, they know who I am. They know the morals that I have, the integrity that I have, who I am as a person, my children, my wife, so I'm not looking for redemption from anybody. But I think it is a problem when you judge somebody based on something that they have done before. Look at the content of their character today. Is that somebody that you want to, look up to today? Don't worry about 13 years ago. They always try and discredit me, law enforcement agencies. And these law enforcement agencies that I speak at and I do trainings with and ride-alongs with, they know that. They have access to all of that. And they accept me as I am. And they know that I am a good person. And they know that I'm doing the right things. Now, one bad decision doesn't dictate your entire life.
And so how do you feel when you're doing these trainings? You've been on the other side where they're like angry at you, but then suddenly they're listening to you.
Taking pictures.
Yeah, what does that feel like?
Me, Mr. Reyes, let's take a picture. Let's go out to dinner. I have a lot of friends in law enforcement who really support me, and it's great. It makes me feel great. It really does. It makes me feel great that, listen, I'm doing something good here. I'm doing something good that people are being receptive to, and that are able to, appreciate what I am doing, because I have the best intentions in the world. I have nothing against law enforcement. I want law enforcement to be a high standards institution, not a low standards institution.
Do they pay you for these things?
So they offered to pay me for each one of them. I declined payment. I provide my own travel to each and every one of these areas, and I decline any sort of payment from them.
Wow. And why is that? Why wouldn't you just take the money and be like, hey, I've earned this. I've been arrested 12 times.
So I don't take the money because, number one, I don't want to put I don't want to take away from their budget for other things. I'm sure they have other things to do. I don't, not so much that I don't need the money. I make a decent living on YouTube and Facebook and everywhere else. I am not like some mega billionaire or even a millionaire or anything like that, where, I believe that when making the amount of money I make now and being in the tax bracket I am now, paying all these taxes, it just opened my eyes to, because I came from nothing. We're putting on a jacket in my house because my mother couldn't afford to put oil in the boiler, rice and eggs every day. So I came from absolutely nothing. And now that I have what I have, I realize that these millionaires, multimillionaires and billionaires, they're just the most greedy people in the world. Like that is the major thing. It's not about, I tell people this on my channel, it's not about left and right. It has nothing to do with left and right. It's about up and down. It's about up and down. It's about the people with money and power. And not me. I don't have, my money's like $50 to these people, and I still go on vacations. I still travel the country. I'm able to do these trainings at my own cost. So imagine if they just gave a little bit more to on their side, what they can do for United States or the humanity as a whole.
So, what? Amen. Oh, yeah. So, so you think that one of the problems in this country is wealth inequality, is what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Wealth inequality. That it's the top 1% of people in this country. You have 80% of people living paycheck to paycheck, having to worry. I was one of those people living paycheck to paycheck, not worrying. How am I worrying about paying my rent this month? Especially where I'm from on Long Island, you can't rent a basement apartment for less than $2,200 a month to live in a one-bedroom basement. I don't know how people are affording it. Sometimes I'm like, do I live in a simulation? Like, because how are you making $2,200 a month? Because I couldn't afford that back when I was making $70,000 a year as a manager. That it was impossible. I was living in that basement apartment for a lot cheaper than $2,200, but I couldn't afford it. I was driving a car where I had to put water in my radiator every 5 miles, roll up windows. This is the life that I lived. And now that I see the other side of it, to where I'm making decent money, I realize, wow, this is a problem. Because when you're working, you're not really worrying about the Elon Musks, the rich, the billionaires and multimillionaires, and they're not really, they're rich. You just see them as rich. But once you realize just how rich they are, and you have that kind of scale on how rich they are, you're like, wait a minute. And they're trying to take every nickel and dime and every percentage point in taxes, trying to save everything, getting tax breaks for their company. It's all about money. It's all about money, from health insurance to, you have the middlemen of health insurance. Why? Why are they making billions of dollars every year as a middleman? Couldn't we just put that back into because government's going to mess it up? Why do we accept that government's going to mess it up? Yeah. I don't understand.
That's a good question. It's interesting because I was thinking about this in regards when I was watching your video. Pulitzer, the guy with the Pulitzer Prize, used to be a horrible gossip guy. He would like sneak into people's apartments and do crazy stuff. And yet he now has a Pulitzer Prize. And so it's interesting to watch people like you. I feel like you're kind of inventing a new form of journalism. Do you feel like you're out there innovating? I mean, this is a softball, but are you a journalism innovator in some ways? Because you come up with things like, I would never go and put a big screen and go into a neighborhood. I'm just not going to do that. Are you feel like you're part of an innovative part of journalism?
So, you know, it's journalism and activism, right? It's kind of a combination of them both. And I am being an activist on behalf of the people as a whole, not just myself, as a people of the whole, for our constitutional rights. So yeah, the funny story, quick story about the billboard truck is the only reason I have a billboard truck is because I own one, is because of government corruption. I rented one for a protest, and they sent felony subpoenas to the billboard truck company investigating this felony crime that didn't exist to intimidate them. And it worked. They said, we're not renting you the billboard truck. We're not messing with the district attorney's office over here in Nassau County. So I went and bought one. I raised money, I took out loans, and I bought my own billboard truck. But yeah, I use it as a tool, an informational tool, to be able to highlight corruption. It's better than me holding a sign out there. It's huge. It can put videos on it, audio, and I could drive it around everywhere. I love it. It's one of my favorite things. So it's great. And when, you know, people are like, oh, you're not a real journalist. You know, what makes a real journalist? You know, is the journalist like an ABC News or a local Fox News reporter who just repeats what their editor tells them to? Is that a journalist? Somebody, a parrot who repeats what their bosses tell them to do, who writes their story and then their story completely changed? I've seen it. I've talked to real journalists and they write a story and then their editor says, nope, change this, change that, change this. I want it to sound like this. That's not real journalism. You're just parroting what these, again, billionaires who own these media companies are telling you they want the narrative that they want you to put out there, whether it's right or left.
Yeah. And I mean, why do you think people don't trust that process? Is it because they feel like the corporatists are running? Why don't people trust, you know, your local Fox affiliate more than they would trust you? Why do you think you've been able to find that audience that would normally maybe have watched mainstream media but now has switched to you? What do you think is the difference between the two of you?
I think they don't trust the mainstream corporate media because, again, there's too many levels to it. I am one man. I read my comments. I interact with my community. They email me. I email them back. I research stories for them. You know, they see me as somebody who is investigating, at least I think, this is my opinion, they see me as somebody who is investigating on their behalf as opposed to, oh, you know, we have a 3-car pile up, you know, things that are important to talk about, but you know, no one's talking about police overtime. You know, no one's talking about, you know, why? Because what happens is, in my experience is these local journalists who are, they're very adverse to, they don't want to criticize the police. Why? Because then the police aren't going to allow them into their little special functions. They're not going to be able to get the tips on the robberies and the car crashes and the kidnappings. They're not going to give them that inside access that these departments give them when they play along.
So, you being completely independent, who holds you accountable? Like, how are you held accountable in your mind?
Yeah, so I'm held accountable by the viewers. So the viewers, again, it's open comments. I don't block anybody. They can criticize me all they want. At the end of the day, I'm held accountable by my friends and the people that are closest to me, and also my viewers and supporters, but mainly the people that I trust, because there's a lot of people on the internet, you know, that just say crazy things, and I get it. They threaten me, they threaten law enforcement. They're on both sides of it. I like to think that I'm friends with attorneys, cops, and they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, I don't like how you handle this situation, or hey, you know, keep doing this, or hey, try this differently. And I'm open for criticism, open for counseling from people. I love to learn, and I love to learn from people. The person I've learned from the most is probably my attorney and now my best friend, Jacob Uriel, former prosecutor for 15 years in Brooklyn, now criminal defense attorney, very educated man, very wise man, and he's taught me a lot about interacting with the public, about, you know, how I go about audits, how I go about looking into things, how I don't want to jump the gun, how I don't want to think something's a conspiracy when it's not, you know, just to look at it objectively and be a critical thinker. Because I believe that the death of nuance and the death of critical thinking in our country is what is making the country it is today.
That is very well said. Last question, because you started talking about learning. What is one thing you've learned in this whole process that, you know, you'd want people to know? Like something you've learned from your side of the camera, from being in these experiences. What have you learned that people should know?
I think the most valuable thing that I've learned and the most eye-opening thing that I've learned is when I first started out, a police officer would talk to me a certain way, disrespectfully, grab at my camera, do something that I found egregious, and I'd be like, "You're gonna get fired." And I was just very ignorant. Now I look back and I laugh. Like, I was very ignorant when it comes to the level of corruption in government. I thought like, oh, he called me an asshole, he cursed me out, because silly me, I thought they would have higher standards than, a Walmart door greeter or a McDonald's employee. I thought that they would have higher standards than that, because if a Walmart door greeter, they spat in my face, I'm pretty sure they'd be fired on the spot. But apparently you get to retire with a golden parachute paid by taxpayers. And that's what I've learned the most, is that it is deep-rooted corruption. Police unions operate. There should be no police unions. Police unions is the main force of what makes corruption in law enforcement, because they donate to these politicians. They're very powerful organizations, and they have control over the politics. If you look at any of these politics, they all take money from donations from the police unions. It's very powerful, but they vote in lockstep with each other for certain candidates. It's very, very, very dangerous.
One question I had is if there was a specific incident where your video footage or your audit led to meaningful change. Like, I was taking a look, you had some court cases in New York, but maybe you could share something with me that you feel like, wow, I really made some process here. I really made a difference.
Yeah, so basically, I would say that my crowning achievement since I started auditing 4 years ago was the change that I'm doing in New York City. That we the people are taking. We are able to change the process. The New York City Police Department, the biggest police department in the country, I took them on head on, and they had a policy where they would not, which violated the law, the New York City Right to Monitor Act, and they were in direct violation of it. They wanted to prohibit recording. They arrested people. They arrested me 2 times. I took them to federal court, and I was granted an injunction, a preliminary injunction on the merits. And now originally it was for everybody, but then the Second Circuit Court of Appeals limited it just to me. So I am currently the only person who can film in the New York City Police Department. That is actually being transferred to the New York State Court of Appeals, the highest court in New York. I feel really good about our chances on winning. The law is on our side, so I believe very shortly everyone will be able to have accountability and transparency inside one of the largest police departments in our country.
Oh, that's excellent. I was also wondering about your opinion on ICE. I mean, I'm sure you've seen the incredible amount of money that's been allocated. I think it's like $75 billion. That's more than like the Canadian military gets. Iran's military doesn't even get this much money. And also they're going around obscuring their faces, not identifying themselves. And from my understanding, there's actually a playbook in which ruses, as they call it, you can use a ruse, and essentially you can lie to someone, you can entrap someone. This is an official part of the ICE playbook. When you see these ICE agents going out into the field, as someone who's been holding law enforcement accountable, what do you think? Does this concern you?
So it does concern me. It concerns me greatly. Again, I stay far away from politics, but this is not politics. This is about our constitutional rights, about due process. Lying is something that law enforcement agencies do across the country. So I don't think that's specific to ICE. Masks seems very specific to ICE. I believe that if you believe in what you're doing, we need transparency in our government, and you should not be wearing masks. Nassau County, the county over from me on Long Island, they recently passed a mask ban, but they made an exception for ICE officers and their police officers. When you have masked agents going around grabbing people from Home Depot parking lots and 7-Eleven parking lots, that's something without due process. That's something that is extremely concerning to me, especially as an Hispanic American. My family's from Puerto Rico, so we're born American. I was born in Port Jefferson on Long Island, New York. My mom immigrated, well, not immigrated, I should say, but my mom came from Puerto Rico to New York at the age of 13. She became a public servant and served our community for 35 years as a supervisor with the Suffolk County Water Authority. She was very proud of her job in serving the community. Single mother, she did a great job. But as far as ICE, I think it's very concerning, and I am in works of doing something to help expose that. People say you don't need due process. Like, oh, they're undocumented. They're undocumented. Well, how do you know? That's the whole point. Is that when due process is so important, because it's not just who cares. They don't get due process. They're undocumented. If they don't get due process, that means I don't get due process. That means you don't get due process. Anybody watching doesn't get due process. It's vital for our society. If we allow this to continue to happen, and this is something that I've been I'm very well familiar that they've gotten a lot of money, more than the military in Canada. I'm very familiar with everything, and it's something that I'm looking into, especially as an Hispanic American. I want to look into it. It's very important to me. Maybe, you know, I'll stand outside of a Home Depot and I wear a t-shirt and I wear some jeans, and if they grab me up, you know, it just proves the point that it's not about, you know, undocumented and citizens. It's about skin color. It's about how you look. It's about, I speak Spanish. I'm bilingual. So, you know, because I'm walking down the street speaking Spanish, or if I happen to go work on a roof somewhere, you're going to take me to El Salvador's gulag. You know, that's something that should concern every single American, regardless of race.